welcome to week 3 of our sock knit along. So last week you had a chance to do your gusset increases and hopefully you have turned your heel, and now we're ready for the next leg of our sock knitting journey. So this week we will be bringing this 4-stitch cable from our foot and turning it magically into an 8-stitch cable which runs along either side of the leg. And we're turning this stocking stitch section that we had here into ribbing so that this will give a nice fit along the leg. So once I show you how to do this 8-stitch cable, and I'll show you with and without a cable needle, we will work the leg, and then I'll show you a great method for casting off toe-up socks that gives you a nice stretchy bind-off. After you've turned your heel, we are ready to begin working the leg. So there are some things we need to do before we get into that rhythm of the cable and ribbing pattern that we do on the leg. So the first thing we're going to do is slip all of these stitches that we had on 2 needles that were the top of our foot stitches. Slip them all back onto 1 needle so they can be united again, and this is back to needle 1, but not for long because it is going to get a name change soon. So I have all those stitches back on my first needle, and then all the heel stitches we worked are all on 1 needle, but we're going to put them on 2. We're not going to divide them evenly though. What I'd like you to do is put, for the small and medium sizes, 13 stitches on our second needle. If you're working the large size, slip 17 stitches onto your second needle. And that will leave us with 15 stitches for small and 19 stitches for large and medium on needle 3. So let's see here, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13. That never happens on camera where I slip the correct number of stitches. Okay, so now we have our heel stitches are divided on the back, and we have our first needle here. So this first round that we're going to do just sets everything up. We're going to be increasing a total of 4 stitches on this round. We're going to be increasing 2 stitches on either side of our first needle, and then 1 stitch on our second and third needles. This just it helps keep the pattern aligned, and also when you're working a large cable like an 8-stitch cable, it does pull the work in a little bit. So increasing a little before you work a larger cable does help to keep consistency with the circumference. We're also going to be moving some of our stitches around. So the first thing on needle 1, we are going to work something called a T5B. This is the only time you're going to work this technique on the round. We're just doing it to get our stitches into position. We're going to work it on the front and then a T5F on the other side. But to do that, you can use your without a cable needle technique. I'll show you with a cable needle just for reference here. So you're going to slip that first stitch of the needle, which is a purl stitch, onto your cable needle and hold it at the back. Then you're going to just knit the next 4 stitches. Okay, and then you're going to purl that stitch from the cable needle. So you're going to bring it back around, and all you're doing is kind of swinging it around to the left. You're moving that purl stitch from before those 4 stitches to after. Okay, after you've done that, we're going to do our increase. So we're going to make 1 by lifting up that bar between our stitches and knitting into the back of the loop. So I have M1, and then we're going to work that P2K2 ribbing. So for the small size, you'll work 4 groups of P2K2 ribbing. For medium, it's 5 groups of P2K2, and for large, it is 6 groups of P2K2 ribbing. So you're going to work that across to the other side, and you're ending with purl 2. And now we're going to do what we did on this side, but just as a mirror on this end of the needle. So first we're going to make our stitch. So we're going to lift up that loop and then knit into the back of it. So I just made a stitch there. And now we're going to do a T5F. So what that's going to do is bring this purl stitch that's at the end of our needle to the right of our 4 stitches here. So to do that, we're going to slip the first 4 stitches. We're going to slip all those knit stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm slipping them onto a cable needle and holding it at the front. And then I'm purling that last purl stitch. And then I'm going to bring my cable needle over and knit those 4 stitches from the cable needle. Whoops. Okay. So we have increased 1 stitch on either side, and we just did a little bit of rearranging of our stitches. On needle 2, we're going to make 1. Now, because we worked some, heel shaping rows, there is a little bit of a gap here because we worked a row on this needle so that the height of the stitches on this needle and the stitches on our first needle are a little different. So what I like to do to close up that gap is I'm not going to lift up this top bar like I normally would for my M1. I'm going to lift up the one below it and knit into the back of that stitch. That just helps to close up that space. So if you do have a space there, that's a good way to close it up. And then I'm going to knit 3, purl 1, knit 1, and then work in our P2K2 ribbing to the end of the row. I'm going to end on a knit 2. So that's why we divided our stitches a little unevenly before we did this round, just to keep those groups of K2s and P2s together. On our third needle, we're going to purl 2, knit 2, either 2 times for small and medium and 3 times for the large size. And then after I do that, I'm going to purl 2, knit 1, purl 1, knit these last 3, and then end with a make 1. And just as I did on that other side, just to close up any space that may be here, I'm actually picking up the loop of the row below that last one. I promise, I just made it look way harder than it is. Eyes, okay. So now I have increased 4 stitches on that last round, and I moved my purl stitches over on my first needle so that I have a group of 8 stitches on either side where our 8-stitch cable is going to be worked. Now, to keep those 8 stitches together, it's always best when you're working a cable panel to have all the stitches that are going to be involved in the cable on the same needle. So in this round, we're just going to rearrange our stitches on the needles a little bit and establish a new beginning of round. So the first needle, we're going to knit or work the first 6 stitches in pattern. So that is knit 4, and then purl 1 and knit 1. That last knit 1 we made or just worked is the stitch we increased before. And now I'm going to slip those 6 stitches that I just worked onto the end of my 3rd needle. And I'm going to go back to my first needle and work in pattern across here in my P2K2 ribbing to the last 6 stitches. So you'll be doing that P2K2 ribbing and ending with a P2. And now what we're going to do is we're done working that first needle. I'm going to slip those last 6 stitches from our first needle onto the beginning of my 2nd needle. So I'm taking those 6 stitches from the end and putting them at the start of this next needle. And then I'm going to work them as a knit 1, purl 1, knit 8, and then purl 1, knit 1, and then P2K2 rib to the end of this needle. And that is where I'm going to end this round. I'm not working this 3rd needle because I would like to renumber our needles. So what was once needle 3 has its time in the sun as our needle number 1. So our beginning of round is now going to be at the back of the leg. So the center of our heel will now become the beginning of our round. So needle 3 is now needle 1, and you will have either 22 stitches for sizes medium or small and medium, and then 26 stitches for a large size. You'll have that on needle 1. On needle 2, it's just the ribbing stitches from the front of our foot. So you're going to have 18 for small, 22 for medium, or 26 for the large size. And then this needle becomes our 3rd needle. So it was previously needle 2, but now it's needle 3. And you're going to have either 20 for the small size or 24 for both the medium and large sizes. So now that we've re-established a beginning of round and we've distributed our stitches, we're ready to begin the first round of our leg cable and rib pattern. So this pattern is an 8 round repeat. We were working a 4 round repeat for our foot, but the leg has an 8 round repeat. And the first round is a cable round. So you're going to begin on your first needle with a P2 K2 ribbing. And you're going to work that either 2 times for small and medium or 3 times for large. And you're ending on a purl 2. You may find it helpful, I know I do, to actually place a marker here before this group of cable panel stitches. When you're knitting in a especially kind of a rhythmic way, like the K2 P2 ribbing, you can lose track of where you are. So having a marker here right before you're going to be working a different combination of stitches just kind of alerts you to the fact that get out of that K2 P2 trance and start working on this cable panel. So the first thing we're going to do is knit 1, purl 1. Our cables are flanked by these P1, K1 stitches just to give it some nice depth. Then across these 8 stitches, we're going to work a C8F. So it's the exact same idea as our C4F down here, but I know you guessed it. We're going to work with 8 stitches. And I'll show you with the cable needle. So I'm going to slip these next 4 stitches on my left hand needle onto a cable needle. 4. And then I'm going to hold it at the front of my work. I'm going to knit those next 4 stitches on my left hand needle. You can do this without a cable needle as well. I will go over that after we work a couple of these. Okay, and then I'm going to bring that cable needle back and knit 4 from the cable needle. We're going to end this needle with P1, K1. So that's the first cable of this round. Along the second needle, we're just working in P2, K2 ribbing. You're just going to pattern across this second needle. And then once we get to needle number 3, I'm going to knit 1, purl 1, and then we're going to work a C8B. So C8B is slip the next 4 stitches onto a cable needle and leave it at the back of your work, and then knit the next 4 stitches on your left hand needle. And then knit the 4 stitches from the cable needle. And we're going to do purl 1, knit 1, and P2, K2 rib to the end of this needle. So that's the first round of the cable and rib pattern for the leg, and rounds 2 to 7 are they're all worked the same. So all we're going to do is, there's no cabling, we're just knitting and purling as it comes up. So we're going to start with a P2 and do our P2 K2 ribbing. I have this very large marker here to let me know this is where my P2K2 ribbing stops. I would normally use a smaller marker. This is what I had within arm's reach. Now I'm going to knit 1, purl 1, knit 8, purl 1, knit 1. On needle 2, we're just working our P2, K2 ribbing. And then needle 3, K1, P1, knit 8, P1, K1, and purl 2, K2 to the end of this needle. So that's the second round of our 8-round repeat for the leg, and you're just going to work that second round 7 more times. So rounds 2 to 7 are just as we just did. It's just knitting and purling evenly around. On the foot of our sock, we worked a 4-stitch cable every 4 rounds. And on the leg of our sock, we're working an 8-stitch cable every 8 rounds. So if that's helpful for you to keep in mind when you're doing this. It's helpful for me, I know that. So I'm ending this first needle with knit 8, purl 1, knit 1. Needle number 2 is just ribbing, P2, K2. And then needle 3, again, is K1, P1, knit 8, purl 1, knit 1, and then P2, K2 to the end of the needle. So that's the third round, which is the same as the second round. So you're just repeating that. So after you work your second round, you're just repeating that to round 7. And then I'll come back on, and the next time we do my first round where we do the cable, I'll show you how to do an 8-stitch cable without the cable needle. I'm just coming up to a C8F because I'm starting a new 8-row round repeat. So I thought that I would just go over how to do a C8F and a C8B without the cable needle. So same basic technique as you were using on the foot when you're working your C4Fs, but you have 8 stitches. So we're going to first slip these next 4 stitches from our left hand needle onto our right hand needle. Then we're just going to knit the next 4. And then take the tip of your left hand needle, skip these 4 stitches you just knit, and slide it in through the front of those 4 slipped stitches. So now I have those 4 slip stitches on my left hand needle, and I'm going to slide my right hand needle out, and I'm really holding everybody securely at the base of the stitches with these fingers here. I'm just holding everything in place. I'm sliding that right hand needle out and reinserting it into the 4 stitches I just knit. Then I'm bringing those slip stitches back around and knitting them. Okay, so that's a C8F without a cable needle. So whichever, if you feel comfortable doing that, try it out. If you try it out and it's not for you, you can use a cable needle, no problem. I love learning and sharing new little tips and tricks. So then on needle 2, I'm just working in pattern across. And then I'll show you how to do a C8B when I get over there to my 3rd needle. Okay, so I'm on my 3rd needle, and I'll show you how to work a C8B without a cable needle. So I'm knitting the first stitch, purling, and then the C8B. I'm bringing my yarn to the front, and I'm slipping these next 4 stitches onto my right hand needle. And then I'm knitting the next 4. Then I'm taking the tip of my left hand needle, and at the back of my work, I'm skipping those 4 stitches I just knit, and I'm sliding my needle in to the back of those slip stitches. This is a little bit trickier than the front cable, I find. I'm not sure of the reason, but I do find it's a little trickier. And then I'm holding those stitches in place at the base with my pointer and my thumb, and I'm sliding my right hand needle out and putting it back in through those stitches that I knit. I'm turning my work, and then I'm gonna knit those slipped stitches. And then continue along. Okay, So that's how to do a C8F and a CFB, or a C8B without a cable needle. So my next 7 rounds are just knitting and purling in pattern, and you're going to repeat those 8 rounds for the leg until your work from the top of the heel up measures 6 inches, approximately 6 inches for the small size, 6.5 for the medium, or 7 inches for the large size. The great thing about toe-up socks that is, I'd say it's probably its main bonus, is that if you're knitting along and you notice that you are running out of yarn, or that you get to your specified length of the pattern, but you have quite a lot of yarn left over, just keep on going. Make sure you leave enough yarn to work 8 rounds of the cuff. But if you're knitting and you're running out of yarn, you can stop. Just make sure you have enough yarn to make your cuff and use it for the cuff. It's a great way to kind of use all of the yarn you have. If you have a beloved, a treasured ball of sock yarn, toe up is a great way to make sure that you're kind of using the most of your yarn. So once you work the cable and you're at your desired leg length, we're gonna work the cuff. Okay, so I've finished my leg and we're ready to do the cuff. So I'm just gonna show you how to do that. The first round, we're just going to do a couple of decreases to get rid of those 4 stitches that we increased before. And we're just going to start off on needle 1 with our purl 2, knit 2 ribbing. So I'm doing that until we get over here to our cable panel, and I'm ending with a purl 2. Then I'm going to knit 1 and then knit the next 2 stitches together. So these next 2 stitches are a purl stitch and the first stitch from the cable. So that's knit 2. Then we're going to purl 2, knit 2, purl 2, and then we're going to knit the next stitches together. So that's the last stitch of our cable and that purl stitch on the other side. So I'm going to knit those 2 together and then knit the last one. Across needle 2, we're just going to keep that P2K2 ribbing. And then on needle 3, we're going to knit the first 2 together. So that's that we're going to knit 1 and then knit the next 2 together. So that's our purl stitch and the first stitch of the cable. Then we're going to purl 2, knit 2, purl 2, and then I'm going to knit these next 2 together, the last stitch of our cable and that purl stitch beside it. And then knit this next one, and then purl 2, knit 2 to the end. So now we're all set up to work in straight purl 2, knit 2 ribbing. So that's just doing purl 2, knit 2 all the way around. So this one is considered the first round of our cuff. Okay, and my last needle on the round. Okay, so now what you're just going to do is repeat that last round of P2K2 ribbing. You're going to do it 8 times more, and then we're going to do the cast off. So once you've finished working your rounds of P2K2 knitting for the cuff, it's time to bind off. So traditional cast off methods will not give you much stretch. So it is important when you're knitting a toe up sock to use a stretchy bind off. This one that I am using in this pattern is really easy to work, and some stretchy bind offs will create kind of a flare in the top of the cast off, and this one, it creates some flare, but it's not too bad. So there are lots of stretchy bind offs out there, but this is the one we're going to cover today. It's very simple to do. So to start, you're going to knit your first 2 stitches. Then you're going to insert the tip of your left-hand needle into the front of those 2 that you just knit and knit through the back loop. So that's how you start it. And then you're just going to repeat the following. So you're going to knit 1, insert your left-hand needle in through the front of those 2 stitches on your right-hand needle and knit them together. So you're just going to keep doing that. Knit 1 and then knit them together through the back loops. Knit 1, knit them together. You're just going to do that all the way around. Okay, so I'm just casting off my last stitch here. I'm knitting those last 2 stitches I have through the back loops together. And now, this is very exciting. Just going to leave a long tail. I'm gonna cut off my yarn here, and I'm gonna pull it through my last loop here and draw it up. And then you're going to grab your yarn needle. First, I'm gonna stop and admire our work. And I'm gonna weave in my ends here. So I'm just going to thread my yarn needle. The first thing I like to do, actually, I find it easier if you just turn your whole sock to the wrong side here. And then when I cast off in the round, the first thing I like to do is make that top edge nice and tidy. So I'm just going to put my needle through the first cast off stitch on the other side here and pull it through and then work it through there and just make a knot and fasten it securely. Then to weave in, I like to leave a long length here, and I'm just going to weave in my ends along the ribbing in the wrong side. So there's a couple schools of thought on how to weave in ends, and if you have a particular way you like to do it, by all means do it. This is my way. I just kind of work my needle through one leg of a knit stitch on the wrong side, and I do that going down. And just kind of pull my work to make sure that that thread is nice and even. And then once I get down a little bit, I normally go a little bit further, then I turn around and I go up the opposite stitch, like the next stitch over, just one leg in that stitch. I'm just weaving in here. I go up. And then I go down again. And that just ensures that you have quite a nice length of yarn inside the sock. If you ever have to do a repair, or maybe the top comes undone after several washings, you have a little bit of a fallback there. And then after I've woven up and down some of the ribbing on the wrong side, just give it a snip. Also, I like to end, wherever I'm weaving in my ends, I like to snip it off down from the cuff, not up at the top, because you do risk like just having a little bit of a yarn and poke out the top of your cuff here. So then I just trim it close to the work. And then we also have our toe cast on yarn to weave in. We left a nice generous tail there, which I always like. And again, the same. So what I'm doing here is on the bottom side of the foot where there's all this stocking stitch, I like to weave in my ends. I also, or you alternately, you could weave in them along these side toe stitches. So first what I do, just at the corner of my toe, make just a small little knot just to secure. And then on this wrong side of the stocking stitch, I take the tip of my needle and I'm just inserting it in through the bottom bump of the garter stitch, or the reversible stocking stitch that's on the wrong side of the work here. So I'm just putting it through the bottom bump of these ridges. So I go across, and then just to ensure that it stays nice and secure, I'm gonna weave in diagonally. So after I weave in across a little bit, I'm going to weave in diagonally. So I picked up a bump on this row, and then I'm going up another row, and I'm picking up a bump in the stitches, one row, going up like that. So I'm going diagonally. This kind of helps to hold everything in. Pulling my yarn, I'm not pulling it tight though, and I'm giving it a little stretch there so that it's not pulling in my work at all. And then I'm gonna go diagonally in the other direction. This just secures it a little bit better than if you just were doing it back and forth. And picking up just one leg of these bumps, make sure that you're not picking up a whole stitch, because then it will show on your right side. So when I flip this back over, you'll see. So I just go diagonally. Also, you can, sometimes you can hide a lot of length of your yarn in the sides here when you're weaving in your stitches. You can hide a lot of yarn there, and you can have it if you need to do any toe reinforcing later. I'm gonna snip it there. Okay. And then the big reveal. Ta-dam! A beautiful sock. So I hope that you have had fun learning how to make toe-up socks. I know that I've had a blast showing you how and sharing the little tips and tricks that I know, and I can't wait to see your socks on our Facebook page or Instagram or on yarnspirations.com. And we'll see you next time, maybe next year, for our third sock knit along. Thanks.